Welcome to another exciting episode of Things I Didn't Learn at Harvard. Today, we're joined by a wonderful special guest. This is our New Year's 2025 edition. Welcome to all of our loyal listeners. Glad to meet with all of you. Today, we have a wonderful guest, Martin Bihl. Martin is an agency veteran, a veteran of advertising and marketing. He's been doing it for a very, very long time with ton of experience, ton of awards under his belt. But to further add to his illustrious accomplishments, I'm going to hand over to my amazing co-host Victor Lee, who's going to add to that introduction. Victor, I'm giving you the virtual mic and baton here. Go ahead.
Thank you, Rajiv. Nice to be here. Happy New Year's, everybody. So Martin and I have been friends for a number of years, and one of the things I always loved about Martin is that he really is sort of the classic advertising executive creator kind of guy, right? I mean, he doesn't. I mean, we're not that old, so we don't quite date back to the Mad Men era, but there's a lot of vestiges of that. And so one of the things I've always admired about Martin is his ability to really condense messages and make them impactful. I think one of his slogans was, "I make people care about things they don't care about." Right? And what better description of advertising is there? So maybe Martin, why don't you just start us from the beginning? How did you get into advertising? What drew you to it? What have you learned over the years? And then we'll get in, and then we'll drill down a little bit more and talk about stuff you're doing today.
Okay. Um, Man, I mean, you guys use words like classic and legacy and experience. I mean, it's amazing I'm still standing at this fucking point. I've been in advertising my whole life. My father was in advertising. My grandfather was in advertising. I had hoped that the cycle of abuse would end with me, but my daughter's in advertising too. Um, I've taught advertising and marketing at the undergrad and graduate level at a bunch of different universities. I've written about it for Ad Age and Ad Week and similar publications around the world, and reviewed books about it. I'm just really and I know this is like the first this is the first rule of advertising. You never express an interest in advertising, but I'm actually really fascinated by it. I think the idea of trying to figure out why people do what they do and trying to figure out how to talk to them in ways that they'll listen. And I just find all that just extremely interesting and fascinating. And I always have, and it always changes, and the technology changes, and the ways that you can connect with people changes. So it's just fascinating to me. So that's what I've been doing in some form or another for most of my life, and mostly as a primarily on the creative side, as a writer, creative director, executive creative director at agencies in St. Louis and Philadelphia and New York and Connecticut, and then freelancing a bit around the world. So that's sort of the short version.
I think advertising is fascinating because I think the best done advertising, people don't know they've been advertised to, right? They think it was entertainment, or they sing the jingle, or they know they can imitate Tony the Tiger doing Frosted Flakes. But everybody likes to think they're immune. So a person who I will go unnamed, but used to say, I'm not affected by advertising. Doesn't do anything.
It's Rajiv, isn't it? Rajiv said that, didn't he?
Rajiv, right? So this person, let's put it this way. It wasn't Rajiv because this person they were smoking Marlboro, right? They would drink Budweiser. They ate Fritos.
I know.
So sandwiches were Oscar Mayer bologna on Wonder white bread. But okay, that's fine. You're not influenced by advertising.
When I would teach undergrads, and I'm not a one who bashes younger generations because every generation is younger than me at this point. But the number of times that I would be sitting in a standing class and teaching advertising in like the first week or two, and there'd be invariably a student who would say like, "Well, advertising doesn't work on me," and I'd be like, "I'm looking at," he's like, "Wearing Air Jordans," and I'm like, "Dude, why are you wearing $400 shoes?" Right. I mean, obviously advertised. They didn't cost $400. There's something about them, right? And explaining that. And I also love the whole, part of that is the whole semiotics component of it, right? That symbols, the things that we use are a language, right? That communicate things about us that we want, that we feel comfortable communicating to other people. So I find that fascinating. And yeah, I mean, one of my advertising heroes is Howard Gossage, right, out of San Francisco. And he said a great many amazing things, but not the least of which is people pay attention to things that interest them, and sometimes it's an ad. And so my job has always been trying to figure out how to make ads that interest people and get people to pay attention on some level. Could be comedy, could be making them cry, could be any number of things. But like, that's the point. And even though that seems really simple and obvious, you know, to do it in any meaningful or successful way means that you have to stop thinking about what you, the seller, want and have to think about what the person you're selling to needs, right? And that's something that I think culturally people are just not really good at.
So
And despite this
Martin,
attitude, I am. Yes. What?
yes, I got to ask you, right? So obviously, like, I come from the advertising agency background as well, worked at Leo Burnett, Saatchi and Saatchi. Many of these agencies are
We're
obsessed
all
with
impressed. Yeah, we
awards.
get it.
Yeah, they're obsessed with awards and creativity, and many agencies kind of skew towards, oh my God, I need to get a gold lion at Cannes, I need to get a one plus, a one show award, the golden pencil or the black pencil or whatever pencil. I need to get the Webby, I need to get the this award, that award, and many agencies are just very very focused on the whole award aspect of it, which to a degree has some validity to it because it helps them get more clients. But then sometimes that also happens at the expense of the client, where they do an ad or a campaign because it's just very creative. It's like, pardon my French, but, some people are accuse certain creatives of like the whole, like, mental masturbation kind of thing, where it's just like, it's just an act of doing
One
it
of, one
for
of
the
my
sake of
favorite
doing
kinds of masturbation, I have to admit.
Right. So I guess my where I'm going with this, Martin, is like, given that this is an industry that intimately, like, what is your take on the whole obsession with awards and all of that? And is there any kind of clear line between getting the award, but also then delivering results to the client at the end of the day, like pushing the needle, getting sales, that sort of thing. Like, the sort of the unsexy stuff as well as the sexy stuff, which is the award side. So how do you, I guess, reconcile the two? And what's your take on this whole awards, obsession?
Yeah. So the people are always looking for legitimacy and justification, right? And in advertising is as I just was reading I just posted a review of How Brands Blow by Walm and Edwards, which is great. And but they quote Garfield in it, and he says, advertising increases likelihood. It's not a slam dunk, right? And so because of that, you're not, you don't know, hey, if I put two women in this ad, will it increase sales to, 15%? I don't know, maybe. I mean, it's possible. So there's no quantifiable spreadsheet component to this. And so people look for that. And so on the one hand, awards help people feel that way, right? In the same way that, like, you're driving down the street and you see an ad for a hospital and it says, ranked number 7 by U.S. News and World Report. You don't know if they're any good, but look, U.S. News and World Report said they are, so maybe they are. I don't know. So people are always looking for that. So that's one component, right? And another component, though, is like most clients, I think, don't even have that much of a sense of really what they're trying to accomplish, right? I mean, the number of clients I've had clients who were like, I remember sitting in when I was freelancing at a place once, and I'm looking at the brief, and I'm like, well, what are we trying to do here? And the person said, well, we want to get 27 million eyeballs on this digital project. And I was like, well, did they do the media buy? Yeah. Well, then it's done, right? Like, it doesn't matter what we put in the ad, right? They told me where the media was going, and I was like, yeah, you'll probably get 27 million eyeballs out of that. Okay, so we could put a picture of my butt on it. It's going to work. You're going to get that. The number of clients who are like, no, I want to drive sales or something. I want to do, it's like, or, in the car business, like, I want to drive people to the showroom, right? Or I want to get people calling qualified leads, or like 90% of the time, you don't even get that kind of stuff in a brief, right? You just sort of get, we need an ad, we need to fulfill the media plan. So again, I think awards are sort of a way of making people feel like, look, it's working, it's being successful. So there's that. And I also think that just on the creative side, you know, um, you know, there's a there there is something very gratifying, and I've judged awards and I've been interviewed by, award shows and stuff like that. You know, and to feel like, oh, it's it did mean something to somebody beyond me, right? Like somebody looked at this ad who had no sort of context of it, and they were like, "Wow, that doesn't suck. That's great," right? And you work on something for weeks and weeks, 24 hours a day, blah blah blah, and you get it done, and you till you can't think about it anymore, and then it goes out into the world, and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work. But then, you send it to an awards show and people look at it and there's a lot of crap in awards shows, but there's a lot of stuff you like, well, these people thought this was good. That makes you feel like it actually accomplished something because you're still trying, even in that sort of rarefied area, you're still trying to make people pay attention to stuff and cut through all the static and the noise. So I mean, I think that there's value in that. To me, you know, I think that part of what your question comes out of is a sort of a sense of siloing within agencies, right? And I've been in those agencies, right, where people are like, I want this, we got to do something that's going to win, a lion.
Right.
Well, okay, let's look at what's won lions in the past, and we'll make something that's kind of like that, right?
Well, that's interesting.
Right? I mean, if that's what we want, if that's the goal, I mean, we can do that. As opposed to we want to make people like I did a campaign for a electronics company that was they were consistently ranked 10th by young people in terms of coolness.
10th out of 10?
10th out of a million. I don't remember many. Yeah. And the point was like, get us higher. That was the goal. Okay, cool. So we did stuff, right? And it wasn't, it was using different media. It was using different kind of creative. It was using different units. It was using different kinds of messaging. It was, doing some guerrilla stuff. It was doing a lot of different kinds of things. But at the end of the year, they were able to look at it and go, wow, yeah, we did that. We ran the survey again, and we're now number 3. That's great.
Wow.
That's a goal, right? I mean, like that makes sense. Did it result in sales directly? No, but the client was, I don't want sales right now. I want people, I'm not even on the radar. I want to get on the radar. So
is that an example of a client who gets it? Would you say that they understood that the client had a clear business goal and understood how advertising could help them achieve that?
Yeah, I mean, yes, very much so. I mean, that was a client who, look, most clients look at advertising as one of a couple different things. One is, it's a tax deduction for one thing, right? So big companies, I mean, no, that is, right? I mean, like that's one of the reasons that they do it. So it's like they can write it off. So they're doing it because, I don't know, we're just supposed to do it, right? And so, or they look at it as, oh, this is just some fun. This is a lot more fun, talking about, doing a commercial or something, going to a photo shoot and, crunching numbers in a spreadsheet. Oh, great. That's fun. I've always, yes.
Martin, so, there's something that you mentioned earlier that kind of just made me think. You said something about the brief that you were sitting in the agency, and they said that, yeah, I just want like 27 million eyeballs on this. That kind of got me thinking. So in that question, was that there's this concept of owned media, earned media, and shared media, right? So it's basically when you do something noteworthy in the world, people take attention. And then, I guess the holy grail is for media to start talking about it. And then that gives you like a lot of buzz. Like, for example, in the age old days, when the classic Smirnoff commercials hit the TV for the first time, people were just zapped out of their minds. But, oh my God, did you see the necklace turn into a snake? And did you like when the, person looks through that Smirnoff bottle? And it was just became like a whole thing of like, wow, these ads were just like a wild take on creativity and imagination and everything. And people were talking about it for ages. And then, of course, you had the Clive Owen BMW films and, all that sort of thing. So I guess the point is, is there a significance to kind of having people just beyond the core? Yes, my customer saw it and maybe it met my communication objective or business objective. But beyond that, is there some sort of an intent or some sort of a desire for the world at large to notice it and for people, like, how do you go mainstream, right? When people start like talking about it, having water cooler discussions, and then be like, hey, did you see that commercial? Like, what do you think about it? So like, I guess, is there some intent for commercials to play a part in pop culture that instigates people to have those kind of conversations, and because then the idea lives further, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, and I would sort of and I might just be quibbling, but I would sort of lift it out of specifically the tactic of commercials, right? But I do think because I think it's any kind of advertising that is done, right? Whether it's traditional or digital or guerrilla street stuff that I've done a bunch of or at point of sale or whatever. Um, but when I was working at a guerrilla agency in Manhattan for a while, right after the towers came down, so that was a lot of fun trying to create street theater then. I realized that really word of mouth is kind of the ultimate goal, even more than sales, right? Because not not just because of the okay, I spent $1 million and it reached 1 million people, but then word of mouth made it reach 2 million people, so therefore my spend was, better. But because of the endorsement of those people, right? Victor telling Rajiv, "Did you see this thing? It's really cool," is infinitely better than an ad, an award, or just seeing it on TV. I mean, it has that
Right.
implied endorsement of somebody that he appreciates, and so that is the thing. And you look back at even at the ads from the past, that have been successful. The famous one, but it works with other ones, is the 1984 Apple ad, right?
Yeah,
Which
I was thinking of
I
that
mean,
too.
Which we're talking
people
about
people
40 years later, right?
right. People told each other about that ad, right? I mean, they talked about that. That made it more compelling and important. I mean, I'm convinced that 50% of the strength of like Saturday Night Live in the early days was, people being able to talk about it on Monday morning about, did you see these Coneheads? It's crazy. Or did you see John Belushi as, the samurai guy? That's crazy, right? I mean, and the people who didn't see it, like now they felt out, right? And they had to know about it, right? So there was that component to it. I mean, even looking back to something like, in the early 60s, the lemon ad, right? Or the think small ad for Volkswagen. I mean, you had people talking about it. Did you see the next one? Did you see that one? It's really cool. Oh, I haven't seen the lemon one, but I've seen this one, this one's being sent back ad. Oh, it's like that word of mouth, not just because of the sort of, you know, and I've spent enough time trying to teach this stuff to MBAs. It's like it's not just because of the spend. It's because of your friend has value to you and your friend thinks it's cool, that makes this thing more cool and more interesting to you. And it gets back to the Gossage thing, right? People pay attention to what's interesting to them. Sometimes it's an ad. So make ads that are interesting.
And
Don't make just ads that fill fucking media plans.
so, Martin, so this kind of like goes back to I think the core issue here, which is the message, right? So I'd like for you to kind of tell our audience, maybe school our audience on what are the, I don't know, ingredients of a good message. Because this is something that's so basic, but yet so overlooked because most people, as they, I don't know, elevate in their careers, have a much murkier vision of what this really means and how to approach the whole thing of how to get your message straight.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a tough one. Because no, because I mean, because there isn't a template for it, right? I mean, it's like 99% of it is, like sometimes people like say, "Oh, did you see such and such an ad? I hate that ad." And I'd be like, "Well, were you the audience?" Well, no. Well, then let me talk to somebody who's the fucking audience and see if they liked it or not, right? Right? I mean, like that's and so 99% of this is like trying to figure out who are we talking to. And we've all been in advertising agencies, right? Where you look at the briefs and it'd be these were briefs I used to get all the time back, years ago would be like, we're targeting women 18 to 54. And at one point I said to these guys, I said, okay, so my daughter and my wife are between 18 and 54. Like, and I would never talk to them about anything the same way. I mean, not because they're not stupid, but just because they have totally different
Yeah.
symbols, vocabularies, contexts, everything, right?
Yeah,
So it's
different
about
triggers. Yeah.
Right, right. And so, and if you do, if you do talk to your daughter and your wife exactly the same way, then you have some counseling. So, to me, it's a lot about trying to figure out, you know, who you're talking to and understanding them, and then also being really clear about what you're trying to say. Most times, again, we'll sit, we'll get briefed on stuff, and people will be like, well, what's the message? And and the message will be like, here are the messages. It's like, come on, it's a billboard, or it's a TV spot, or it's a video, it's pre-roll that's going to be, I have 7 seconds before they watch the video of the guy falling off the ladder or whatever. I can't jam in all this kind of stuff and make it interesting, right?
Oh, you're
So
saying multiple messages within a single creative piece?
I'm saying that they can't. I'm saying that there's a lot of things that they want to accomplish,
In
and you
one message,
can't.
yeah, right, okay.
And you have to be specific, right? I mean, if I had to give it like sort of a template, right? And this is something I've said that at universities to try to help students understand. In on one level, I'm going to get fucking sued for this. On one level, advertising is not unlike dating,
Right.
right? And so, if you meet somebody in a bar and you just stand there talking about yourself,
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
Nobody
interesting, right?
cares.
Yeah,
unless, admittedly, you're Brad Pitt, okay, Brad Pitt gets to talk about himself, right?
right.
Why? Because the person talking to Brad Pitt is bringing all that, information and everything to the story, right? But if you're just meeting this person and you just stand there talking about yourself, but also think about the other way people do when they meet people in bars or on dates, right? They'll be like, well, I have this really cool car and I make this kind of money and like, right? But they're not, which we see brands do that kind of stuff all the time, right? Oh, I'm more absorbent, or faster yield, or blah blah blah, all this kind of these kind of weird amorphous features, right? As opposed to, and this is where it gets weird in terms of dating, benefits,
Right, right,
right? Right? Like, let's go on a date and I promise I won't punch you. I mean, maybe that's a benefit. I don't know, but like my point is like those are things like it's not that different. And when you put that, when you show people that, especially when I teach, college students, and they'd be like, and unfortunately, yeah, women, they'd be like, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about now because I stood and, listen to guys talk about how cool they are, and I don't care, right?
So,
And that would be the template for
So,
delivering a message.
Martin, like you said something about like people have this obsession about like, hey, I want to cram as much information in as possible. And I know that a while ago I read this concept. I don't know whether it was David Ogilvy or who that came up with this, but there was something about the single-minded proposition where you just want to have one central hero idea in any message and just kind of like go in deep on that because people have like a finite, processing power, ability to absorb new ideas and stuff like that. And especially given the landscape that we find ourselves in right now, like you said, the 7 second pre-roll, how much can you truly absorb in 7 seconds? Not a lot, unless it's just one super
But
simple.
also, but also, dude, but also beyond just being able to absorb it, and you're right. I mean, there's that just sort of like cognitive part. Nobody cares, right? Like
ah,
nobody's sitting around waiting. Gosh, I really hope there's a commercial before this pre-roll, right? Nobody's driving down the highway going, I hope there's a billboard I get to read. Like nobody
Yeah,
cares, right? So, but everybody who makes advertising, and I understand why they think this. I understand why clients think this because they're spending it's their money. I want to talk about myself. It's my
right,
money, right? But nobody they think I gotta no, I gotta talk about this, right? Oh, but maybe you know maybe somebody like Victor's driving down, so I better talk about stuff that Victor cares about. Oh, but maybe Martin's driving down, so maybe talk about Martin's. Oh, and maybe Martin's daughter's driving. Like, and you're like, no, no, you can't talk to everybody about everything all the time because nobody's paying attention to begin with. And the only way that you can make your message resonate with people is when they feel like you're talking to them. Like one of the things that drives me crazy about podcasts, for example, apropos,
hopefully not this
is
one.
no, I love this podcast. Is is when people start off the podcast with, "Hey, everybody." Okay, nobody listens to a podcast in a crowd.
Oh, that's interesting. Oh, so
Now,
should they
now
address
the
them as
three of us,
individuals? Yeah.
now the three of us are aware, hopefully, that there's more than one person out there listening to this, right? But that person is listening to it by himself or herself,
That's really interesting. I never thought of it that way.
right?
Yeah,
So
the
the
only
more that you're able
exception,
to talk, what's
the only
that?
exception to that is when there are certain podcasts that actually have a studio audience, and that's the only other
Yes, but
exception.
then,
But those are
right,
not.
but
But those are not like everything.
right, and you're addressing the audience in that room, right?
Right.
But most of the time, most of the podcasts, and I mean podcasts that I love, will say this, "Hey, everybody." And it's like, there's no everybody. I got earbuds in. I'm sitting here, or I'm driving in my car. It's just me alone, right? Like that was always the power of radio too, right? Radio was a very personal, intimate thing. So my point is like the more that you're able to sort of focus that message so that the person feels like you're talking to them, because nobody thinks of themselves as part of a crowd.
Right.
I mean, oh, there's this Martin's part of this, older white guy demographic, and he's this thing. Yeah, that's true, but I don't walk around thinking I'm part of this, horde of guys. I'm this guy for good or for ill, right? And the more that you're able to make people feel like you're talking to them, and the advertising I've done that's done that, and or anything that I've written, even when I'm writing reviews or I'm writing essays about AI or I'm writing essays about education or class or whatever, I'm always trying to like make somebody feel like there's this one idiot talking to one idiot.
Oh, that's interesting. Even though obviously everybody's objective is to have as large an audience as possible, the best way to do that is to write, you're saying, as if you're talking to one person.
Yeah, but
Right.
so Victor, I think what you and Martin are kind of getting at is almost like finding those axiomatic truths or universal truths that apply to the audience, which are then applicable to a large body of people. But then when the person hears it for the first time, he or she will think that you're speaking to them and them
Yes,
alone. I think that's what Martin's getting at.
I think that's incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
You wouldn't think so. You wouldn't think coming out of this. But I think that is, but I think that but even when you're talking to anybody, right? I mean, even when you're talking to a crowd, right? Even when you're standing up there doing a TED talk. I mean, Rajiv, you talk to UN and stuff like that,
Yeah.
And there's a large group of people there. But when those people feel like, the test of that is when somebody comes up to you afterwards and was like, "Man, you told that story and boy, you really thought." It's like, yeah. Or like you see on LinkedIn. I had this conversation with somebody about LinkedIn, and they'd gotten laid off, and they'd written this thing, and it really resonated. It got a lot of traction. It's like, yeah, because when I read it, the guy had really written it as not, "Hey, everybody, I've been laid off and I'm looking for a job." And I hope it felt very personal. When you read it, you felt like you were really hearing this guy's story and you could relate to it on a personal level. So yes, there are universal truths, and I've done, hospital advertising and stuff like that speaks to sort of broader universal truths. But the point is to do it in a way that makes a person feel like you're talking to them. And that can be the creative, that could be the media, that could be the production of it, right?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
It could be any
I think
number of things.
I think that's great. I think that's very powerful. That's very insightful. And I think it's something that really should apply to anybody who's listening, regardless of what they're doing, because we're always trying to get the message out. So maybe we should kind of wrap it up at this point. Thank you so much, Martin. I think
That's Victor's code for I have another call. I have to go. I'm a very
Yes.
important person.
well, I have a call with a very important person. But anyway, yeah. But no, that's good. I mean, that's what we were looking for. It was really something actionable that people can kind of think about when they're crafting their next message of any kind, right? Whether it's an advertisement, whether it's a blog post, whether it's social media, whether it's an email. So,
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I mean, and it's really hard because
yes,
you really got to pay attention to who you're talking to
right.
and think about them. And
That's why they should call you.
again, what?
That's why they should hire you.
Yes, yes. And that's the grand paradox that this guy is really good at thinking about other people. That's the thing that makes everybody mystified.
So Martin, a little birdie told me that you're a part of this hot new agile consulting service called the Foundry. Anything you can share with us in the last few minutes that we have here?
Yeah, that's I'm partnered with these two rocket scientists, where we help startups figure out how to talk more intelligently about themselves because, as we were just saying, startups are trying to get money. VCs have money, but they don't have any time, and they don't have a lot of time to screw around. And the number of times startups are excited about the thing that they're working on. They're not thinking about how to talk about it. And
Hmm.
so the people we work on trying to help them not to foist on top of what they're doing some artificial thing, but to really drag from within them. This is what's exciting about this. This is what makes this important. And to say it in a way that after a VC has watched 75 pitches, they still go, those guys, that was a thing that made a lot of sense. So it's fun. I mean, it's interesting. It's entertaining. And hopefully successful so far.
Perfect.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Martin. It was great seeing you. Thanks,
Talk to you
Rajiv.
guys soon.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Until next time.
Bye.